take on learning styles debate is that there really isn't much of a debate anymore. I think that the science is pretty clear, particularly research coming out of neuroscience in particular, which pretty clearly and compellingly shows that the human brain doesn't work in such a sort of discriminated way that learning styles is something that should guide heavily what we do in the classroom or how we teach. But in fact, what neuroscience has made very, very clear is that we learn best by having a multitude of different experiences or sources of exposure to any piece of content, information or skill or practice. So the way to sort of translate this into pedagogical practices is that we shouldn't be preferring any particular learning style, but we should be giving students opportunities across learning styles. They should be able to engage kinesthetically, visually, auditorially. All of the styles should be used because all of these give cues in putting a piece of information into our brain. And the more different ways we put it in, the more easy it is to get that information out. And that's what we're trying to do with our students, is create not just the retention and sort of embedding of information, but the ability to retrieve that information. And that's really at its core what learning is, the ability to retrieve the information and do something with it. And if we get too bound by a learning style and say someone is a visual learner and only present things in pictures, then pictures become the only cue to retrieve information. And that's not the real world. I'm going to answer this in relation to another question, which is asking about transforming STEM teaching, because I think talking about an example in STEM teaching can best sort of illustrate how we're using the research around pedagogy to drive practice. What usually drives teaching practice is tradition and experience, right? So how I was taught is how I tend to teach people, or what worked for me is what I tend to do for other people. But when we look at evidence-based research, when we look at philosophies and approaches that are student-centered, what we realize is that there really is no sort of one prescriptive way to teach, and that students need a multitude of different experiences through which to learn something. And really one of the biggest roles of an instructor is to create conditions for learning to happen, not necessarily to do the learning for the student or to just deliver information, but to create conditions and opportunities for the right kind of learning to take place. And one of the things we know from the science is that things like talking are really important for learning, right? It's one thing to listen to a lecture, no matter how engaging or interesting or revealing it might be, and that does work. That is an important component to a learning process, but it's only a component of it. And we know that for our brains to fully sort of own a piece of information, to do with it what we need our students to do with it, they have to have opportunities to talk and to make meaning and to make their own sense of what they are being exposed to put it in their own words, right? And this is exceedingly important, particularly in STEM education, which is, I think, a group of disciplines that has historically been very traditionally focused on a lecture approach, particularly in lower division courses. As you're beginning to get into the discipline, it's lecture, lecture, lecture. But what we know from the new research is that that actually might be the least helpful thing for getting students prepared for the disciplines in STEM, and that they need opportunities to talk, to reflect, to make sense, to make meaning, to hypothesize, to generate their own ideas and to test them and to see where they're wrong and to fail and understand what it is to persist through that failure and realize success. So this is really transforming the way we not only work with faculty, but particularly STEM faculty. And on our campus in particular, we have recently received some really nice grant funding to further disseminate a program designed on creating faculty learning communities amongst the STEM disciplines, where faculty are going through a year-long program being exposed to the research, coming up front to the research, and really making sense of it for what it might do for their own classes and how they design courses. And what we see in the second semester are the beginnings of transformation of their courses from, for many, a strict lecture approach to looking for those strategic places, times, and opportunities to get students to be doing some of the work too, to get them reflecting, to get them talking, to get them hypothesizing, whatever it may be, but to have them start becoming scientists from day one.